plant them for somebody and also watching the water. It worked out.
So you continued to be a guard. You just
I continued to be a guard, but not technically an Ocean City guard.
All right. So did you work with these two fellows?
Pardon?
Did you work with these two guys?
Yeah, Bill was the guard when I was. Am I answering this right?
Yeah, you're doing just fine.
Say Bill Pacey, though.
Yeah, when I was on the beach patrol, there were 18 of us, counting Captain Craig, and it was his first year as captain in 1946. I was a pretty lean, skinny guy then, but I guess the biggest beefy guy was Bill Pacey, and I think he was probably the best swimmer. I was one of the poorer swimmers, but my swimming improved after I got interested in getting in competitions.
What about girls and lifeguards? How do girls fit into this whole lifeguard thing?
Well, I made a mistake while I was in the Army. I got married. So I was married when I was down here, so I can't give you any stories about girls while I was a lifeguard.
Okay.
That marriage didn't work out. I got married again, which lasted for 40 years, was the right one.
What did you guys do for fun?
The beach patrol? Well, as I say, I was married. I can remember going down to the Pier Ballroom with my then wife, and that was a popular place back in those days for dancing and socializing.
Any funny stories that you guys? I mean, this is the time to sort of record them for all time. Any funny stories that you guys like to tell on each other, about each other, with each other?
Being married and all the other guys were single, I have to admit, I didn't socialize with them. A funny story, I don't know, I remember having to go in the surf and rescue this nice-looking, well-built young girl whose top of her two-piece bathing suit was wrapped around her neck. I had to put her in a cross-chest carry and bring her in, and got a lot of applause when we hit the beach. She just calmly unwrapped it and put it back where it was supposed to be.
What about dangerous moments?
For me, I don't know about any dangerous moments for me. Back then, we didn't always have a buoy with us when we went in the water. In fact, the only buoys around at that time were the round donut buoys, and they would have been a drag in the water. I can remember going out to rescue a couple that were struggling in the surf, and I put the woman in a cross-chest carry, and the man was pleading with me not to leave him. So I told him to hold on to me, which he did.
And everything was fine?
Yep.
You had me for a second. I was afraid it was going to get scary. Do you ever run into people who thank you later on?
It has happened occasionally, but not too much.
So, but what's it like when someone just
Oh,
walks
here
up
I'm not
to you and
answering the way you wanted me to.
says, "You're doing great."
Most people, after you bring them in, are, especially the men, are a little embarrassed. I mean, they just want to get away from you. So, not too many people thank you.
So tell me, since you still compete representing Ocean City, can you sort of tell me how that first summer of being a lifeguard became a part of your life?
Well, as I say, I worked in North Ocean City as a lifeguard for 10 years, and then the city line moved up and I didn't have the beach concession anymore, so I stopped being a lifeguard, and I was 35 then. But later on I was on the city council here, and I remember some of the guards saying, "You're the only elected official that ever paid attention to the guards." And they had started having these regional and national lifeguard competitions, and to be eligible to compete, you had to be a lifeguard or an ex-open water lifeguard. So I started competing, and as I say, over the years my swimming improved from when I was new on the beach patrol in Ocean City. So I've done reasonably well. I've represented the city in national competitions, in the Gulf, in the West Coast, the East Coast, and the Great Lakes, and I've gone on to world competition a few times, and I think I'm the only one from Ocean City that's ever gone on to world competition.
Wow. What brings you to this reunion? I mean, I know it's easy for you because you're local, but still, you
Well, it's good to see your friends, and I only live a couple blocks from here. I understand some of the fellows have had to travel a long distance. And it's been a big part of my life. I thought I'd come down here and work one summer, and here I am.
Where are you from?
Baltimore.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
What was it? Let's see. What about, did you come here as a kid? Or is it just
No, my family was a working class family, and we just didn't take vacations that I remember. One summer I was working in a canning factory in southeast Baltimore, and some kids from another high school said, let's go to Ocean City, and I don't know if I knew anything about Ocean City. We hitchhiked down, stayed for a week, and then I did it again the next summer for a week. Then I went in the Army, and I told you that when I got out of the Army, I came down here and worked as a guard. So I'd only spent 2 weeks in Ocean City. 43 and 44, 45 I was in the Army, and 46 I worked down here.
Okay. Any questions, Bill?
What was it, you know, anything that you want to talk about relative to like 1946 or 45 and 46 must have been an interesting time because, you know, after the war, you have all the returning servicemen, and how was that maybe different from other periods?
Well, 45 I was in the service,
Right, but say
so I missed that
46,
summer here. 46, there were 18 of us, and I was not the only returning veteran. There were a few other veterans, as I remember, going to beach patrol. And then there were some of the fellows that had been guards here in previous years, because during the war, the older fellows were not here, and they had to hire teenagers, sometimes very young teenagers, to guard the beach. And they had been here for a couple years, and as I remember, Bill Pacey was one of them. I believe he was still a teenager when I was on.
Was there any kind of weirdness about that, funniness about returning veterans coming back to find that there were children guarding the beach?
Not that I can recall that the veterans thought anything different of the teenagers who were here. And I don't think you'd call them children.
I was just trying to get a spark, that's all. Okay. Okay, is there anything you want to say in particular, knowing that this is going to be in the Ocean City Beach Patrol Museum forevermore?
No, nothing that I can think of else.
I'm saving it for my own.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
How about, somebody was mentioning yesterday about there used to be fishnets out. There's one story last night downstairs about swimming out to the Buick, which was a mile out. And then somebody else was mentioning, not downstairs, but there were fishnets, and people used to swim out, it was like a mile and a half out. And there must have been sharks all around it. So.
Back in those days, you could see the pilings sticking up well offshore that held nets for commercial fishermen. I think they called them pound nets. And eventually, they didn't catch enough to make it worthwhile, and they did away with them. But yes, they were out there for some years back then.
And did you all swim out to them? I heard.
I didn't, but as I say, I wasn't that good a swimmer. I shouldn't say. That guy there was one of the better swimmers.
How about body surfing?
Oh yeah, we did that. And surfing wasn't around then. I did become a surfer, and people thought I was surfing since I was a kid, but when I was a kid, there was no surfing here. As I remember, I was 35 years old before I tried surfing, and then I got into it pretty much. I think I'm the only one here that did tandem surfing. I used to be able to surf carrying somebody on my shoulders, but I'm beyond that now. My partners were always little females who were athletic, like gymnast types. They'd weigh 100, 110 pounds.
Did the guards compete with each other in body surfing, or was it just everybody for fun, or were?
I think, as far as I remember, it was for fun. There might have been some competition, but not any organized competition.
I think we're good.
Okay?
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Now,
Okay. I'm Ellsworth Boyd, Els for short, and I lifeguarded here in 1951 through 1955 in Ocean City.
okay. What made you want to be a lifeguard?
Well,
Uh-oh, hang on.
Hold on.
Hello?
Yes.
Barbara, are you
what beach
downstairs?
there
I'm
they
coming
guard,
down.
where everybody guarded, and then to maybe did everybody tend to guard at Dad said he always was at 9th Street. Did you all tend to guard at one beach? And
if you wanted to, if you chose a beach and wanted to keep that beach, usually Bob let you.
Because when we do the expanded version, we could talk about that, and then everybody because they would be an expert on that area. What was there, the little shops, the restaurants, the
Yeah.
characters.
Yeah.
But you could almost turn this into. I mean, you could do a lifeguard film, but you could also do a film about the history of Ocean City
Yeah.
and expand it to,
Right. Yeah.
to another level.
As a matter of fact, I'm going to mention a place called Lambros that's still here, and that's where I was the soda jerk, and that's where I left to go onto the beach. To be a
Okay.
beach boy.
Right. So, all right. So go ahead.
Yeah. So, okay, are you ready to?
Yeah. Why don't we start?
Okay. So,
What
tell
made me-
me, what made you want to become a lifeguard, and how did you become a lifeguard?
Well, I was a soda jerk in a place called Lambros, which was a combination drugstore and apartments.
Hold on one second.
Yeah, I was a soda jerk at a place called Lambros, which is still here in Ocean City between 4th and 5th Streets. It was a drugstore, and above it were some apartments. And I got tired of dipping ice cream and flipping hamburgers, so I asked the late Bobby Bounds, who was the beach umbrella boy, if there were any jobs there, and he said no, but they need lifeguards. So the lifeguard out in front of Lambros was named Bobby Musgrove, and I asked Bobby about, is it true they need lifeguards? And he said, yeah. And I said, I'd like to be one, but I don't think I can swim well enough. He says, oh, I've seen you swim out in front on your break times. He said, you can make it. I said, but I don't know the breaks and holds. I'll teach them to you. And I said, how about taking the buoy through the surf? I'll teach it to you. So he worked out with me, and then I took the test, and I got on the lifeguards that way.
Any particular reason you wanted to be a lifeguard, or was it just an opportunity?
Well, I think it was a matter of fact that I had met several of the fellows, and I liked them a lot. And of course, there was the allure of the suntan and the pretty girls, and strong responsibility, which for me was, I was kind of like the quiet, low-key type. For me, it was probably one of the best things that could have happened because it brought me out, personality-wise and responsibility-wise.
It's hard to be shy when all the girls are hanging on your tail.
Well, I tell you the truth, if you were a good lifeguard, you noticed the girls, but you had to watch the swimmers like a hawk. When I first got on, I wasn't very good at picking out a drowning person. They don't necessarily yell for help. And then I got with a fellow by the name of Ed Smith, and he gave me all these pointers, and I could tell, I got to the point where I could tell if a person was going to get in trouble before they knew it because of the way of their stroke and where they were in the water, whether they were in a riptide or not.
When you sit on the beach today, what's it like for you?
Well, it brings back fond memories, and of course you can't help but watch the lifeguards. And once in a while I'll find myself standing on the beach looking at the swimmers, thinking, well, maybe the lifeguard will miss one and I'll get a chance to renew the old days, because I still feel that I could go out and save somebody.
Did you ever have any really scary moments?
I had one very, very frightening moment in my 4 to 5 years in Ocean City, and I was on 4th Street, which was my regular beat. The 3rd Street lifeguard was at lunch, and the 2nd Street fellow was down there where there was quite a strong riptide, and I saw him go into the water. He blew his whistle giving the signal, so I moved to the 3rd Street stand to cover him, and then I realized He was so far out he was going to need me. A young boy was on a surf mat, and a west wind was blowing. The west wind blows everything out to sea, and it had blown the boy on the surf mat out to sea. Fortunately, he had stayed on the mat. But my friend was way out there, and I saw him wave to me, so then I blew my whistle to get another lifeguard to cover the stand, and then I started swimming. And there was a riptide running, which is like a river in the ocean, and it just carried me right. I hardly had to swim. It carried me right out. We were out there, and when we looked on shore, those people looked like little teeny tiny figurines on the beach. We were that far out. So then when we started to pull the boy in, we took him off of the rubber raft and put him on the torpedo buoy, which is our standard means of saving people. And I held him on the buoy, and then my other friend Sam was pulling the buoy in. But it was hard to get it in because the rip was still running. So we went parallel to shore to work out of the riptide, which is the standard procedure, and we worked out of the riptide. But I swear we must have been out there 45 minutes, which seemed like a lot longer. And then we finally got him in. There must have been 500 people lined up on the beach watching this scenario. And the funny part of it was, when we got in, I picked the boy up and carried him in on the beach, and when I put him down on the beach, he gave me this real disgusted look and stomped away. So they don't always thank you. I think it's probably an embarrassment factor. They don't always thank you after you say, which didn't mean anything to me, but it would have been nice to have said, thanks, see you later.
Did the crowd applause or anything?
Yeah, they would applaud. They applaud, and one woman, I'll never forget this, one woman said, "You'll be rewarded in heaven." I'll never forget that.
That's great. What'd you guys do for fun?
Well, we would gather in front of a place called Hagen's down in the lower part of the boardwalk and sit on the benches and shoot the breeze, and then kind of flirt with the girls as they went by. And then on occasion, we would get together, couples would get together, and we'd go way up the beach. Well, way up the beach could have been 15th or 16th Street, where there were sand dunes, and we would build a fire on the beach, and we would have a beach party, right, which of course is non-existent now, and that was kind of like one of our major fun things to do. And then of course sometimes after work we would go out and ride the waves. That was a very favorite thing to do, not on surfboards, but just body surfing.
What about sharks and whales and submarine sightings, anything like that?
We would see porpoises offshore quite often. And you could tell the porpoise because it made a sort of a circular motion. It wasn't just a straight zigzagging movement like a shark's fin. And people would run up and point and say, "Sharks, sharks, sharks," and I'd have to explain, no, they're porpoises. Now there were sharks out there because occasionally, and one time I did have the pier down in front of the Atlantic Hotel. I was a lifeguard in front of the pier for one summer before I got 4th Street, and they would catch sharks off the pier. There were sharks out there. They were there, but I suppose maybe the bait being thrown off the pier drew them in. But as far as swimming, to the best of my knowledge, for all the history of Ocean City, I don't ever remember anybody being attacked by a shark. And my goodness, the lifeguards, we swam 7, 8, 9, 10 blocks every Monday morning, and we didn't swim in close to shore. We went out a little distance, and knock on wood, nobody was ever bothered or saw a shark.
What about this infamous pound net? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I remember the pound nets, and at the time I wondered what they were. I really didn't know why they were there. I knew it had something to do with fishing, and they would be like rectangular or square with big poles holding them up, and you could see them offshore, not too far offshore. And I think they eventually did away with them because the pound nets were trapping fish that shouldn't have been trapped, that should have been let go. They were looking for certain species. I'm not sure exactly what the species were, but they were catching fish that shouldn't have been caught, and they'd get in there and couldn't get out and would die. And also, I don't think that the production of the pound nets was nearly as good as the big commercial boats that were dragging the nets offshore.
Someone told us that you guys would swim out to these pound nets and that they were a good mile out.
I don't remember anybody of my era swimming out to the pound nets. Maybe once in a while somebody might have, but to swim a mile out and a mile back for a really good swimmer wouldn't have been that big a deal, because some of the lifeguards would swim a mile on our Monday morning workouts. They might say, okay, we're going to do 8 blocks, and they do a mile. So swimming a mile, and sometimes some of them swam the inlet, which has very, very strong currents, just for the heck of it, say, hey, I swam the inlet. So if you had your good, strong swimmers, they could do that without too much hassle.
Any stories you want to tell about it that may or may not include you? Interesting stories that happened while you were a guard?
It wouldn't include me.
Would or would not, either one.
Only that I think that being on the Ocean City Beach Patrol was probably the single most impressive and important aspect of my whole life, because not only that did it bring out the responsibility factor and the knowledge that, hey, people's lives are dependent upon me, but it also enabled me to learn to socialize and get along with people, not just my peers on the patrol, but the tourists and all, and sometimes they would invite you to dinner, and it kind of brought me out. I was always a quiet, reserved, bashful type, and it kind of made me develop my personality and feel more at ease with people and more at ease socially. And Bob Craig was a major factor of that. Bob Craig is the catalyst that held the whole patrol together, and even to this day, Bob Craig still holds the patrol together, even though he retired in 1986, and I believe he was on the patrol. I believe he was on the beach for 52 years. So he still holds us together today. And I organized the first reunion in the year 2000. And this is the second one now, second Ocean City Beach Patrol reunion in 2003. And Bob, of course, was there at the one I organized and at this one. And then when I asked everybody to raise their hand, how many people were hired by Bob Craig, all the hands went up. So that shows you that he still is the one that holds us together.
What made you think about having the first reunion?
A fellow by the name of Lucky Jordan, who's retired in Titusville, Florida, suggested that we have a reunion. And since he was in Florida and I was up here, he said, would you kind of try and get things together, because a lot of the fellows are still up in Baltimore, although some came from as far. Donnie Hahn came from California, and Bill Pacey came from Maine, and some others came from Virginia. A lot from Florida, retired in Florida. So I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. Getting the names of the guys the first time around in the year 2000 was the major objective, and it was tough. But as I would contact one, he'd say, well, I know where so-and-so is. And then another would say, well, I know where so-and-so is. Then I went to the colleges and the universities. A lot of them, majority were college students. I was a college student from Washington College in Chestertown at the time. And I'd go to the college alumni associations and ask them if they could go back in their books, and I'd give them a rough idea of the year. And in most instances, they'd say, yeah, he still keeps in touch. Here's his mailing address. And that's how I found Bobby Musgrove at the Naval Academy.
But what made you think? How did the initial seed of getting everybody together?
Well, because I still, when I would come to Ocean City, I would keep in touch with Bob Craig. I'd go over and say hi to Bob Craig. And once in a while, the subject of the old guys would come up, and we'd say, gee, nice to see so-and-so again. Well, didn't you? Nice to see Lucky. Nice to see Jim Kelly again. Nice to see. So it sort of became, gee, maybe we ought to get together, because we're not getting any younger, and some of them had passed on. So let's get together, and as long as Bob was around, that was the key to the whole thing. If Bob hadn't been around, we probably wouldn't have done it.
Okay. Yeah, John?
Well, those Fish Pals was he was a lifeguard for a long period?
Yeah, now Bob George, who you just interviewed, would probably tell you a little bit more than that. But Fish Powell was a lifeguard. Harry Kelly, the deceased mayor, was a lifeguard. A lot of the well-known politicians were lifeguards. Some of them passed on, some still around. But a lot of prominent Ocean City people were lifeguards. Yeah. Yeah, Bob Craig kind of gave a little rundown on that at the reunion that we had at the Beach Plaza Hotel last night.
Was there any was there any tension between the townies and the sort of the Baltimore, or the Baltimore, Washington, or out of state guards?
No, not really. No. The funny part of it was, sometimes you'd run into somebody who said they're a lifeguard at a pool in Baltimore, and you'd see them go into the ocean, and you'd almost have to rescue them, because the pool, being certified to be a lifeguard in a pool, was 1,000% different than being a lifeguard and going through surf and fighting through riptides and doing the things that you have to do in a strong with waves crashing down on you.
So do you think, did you belong to a fraternity or athletic teams in college?
Yeah, I was a track performer. I ran the high and low hurdles and the high jump, and I belonged to a fraternity. And I went to a little tiny school, nothing anywhere near the size of University of Maryland, which a lot of the guys came from. So the social things that we did at my little school were minuscule compared to some of the fellows that came from the big universities. So when I came down here, I sort of enhanced my social activities and met more people and branched out, so to speak.
Would you say that you're having been an Ocean City lifeguard kind of puts you in a different fraternity?
A fraternity now that is growing smaller as we grow older, although we still do keep in touch with the captain who succeeded Bob Craig. We still keep in touch with him once in a while, Butch Arbin. But it is, you could call it a fraternal group, but it's smaller now. It's much smaller as we get older, but it's a very, very close group, and I feel as close or closer to these fellows than I did to anybody that I went to college with.
How do you feel about, or how do people who were guards in your era feel about the guards now? Now there are hundreds of them.
Well, I feel bad for the guards today because they will never, in my estimation, they'll never ever achieve the camaraderie that we achieved because there's so many of them. Ours was such a small group. I think there were 15 or 16 or 17 regular guards, and then 5 or 6 came in on the weekends. Well, what's that? 20-some guards. There's 200 lifeguards now, and they're broken up into sections, and they have section chiefs and more like a military-run organization. Whereas when I was here, Bob Craig rode up and down the boardwalk on his bike, and that's how he checked everybody out. And you see him coming up and down on his bike, and he'd come out and he'd talk to you, he'd tell you a joke, he'd give you your paycheck, and it was just a totally different, warm, intimate time that I said to somebody at the reunion, it will never ever exist again, and it will be one of our fondest memories, the closeness of it all. And Ocean City today is like, oh God, it's so huge, it's so big, and it was so small then. We have the fond memories of that smallness, and we still like to walk the boardwalk and see what old hotels are still there because they're gradually being torn down and big ones. And my hotel, the Shoreham at 4th Street in the boardwalk, is still there, and it still looks exactly like it did when I lifeguarded, and that is unusual because I've seen so many of them that have been ripped out.
What do you remember when they started having women lifeguards on the ocean?
Yeah, now I had that, I wrote an article for a magazine called the Valley Times, which is distributed in Baltimore County, and I wrote that article after our last reunion, and I interviewed one of the first gals, and for some reason or other 1972 sticks in my mind, but don't hold me to that. You might want to check that, but it seems to me 1970s may have been the first time the gals came on, and you'll have to talk to maybe somebody who was on the patrol when the gals came on, because there was resentment at first, but then when they realized that these girls were exceptionally good swimmers and that they were, you know, just as good or in some cases better than some of the guys handling the beach, more conscientious sometimes, then they realized, well, the girls are here to stay and maybe we need more of them.
Okay, well, that's a story for a different day. I just wanted to.
Butch Arbin, would, the present captain, would be a real good one to tell you that. He's been on 31 years.
Wow.
And you know Bob Craig was on the beach for 52 years, 54 years? And captain for 40. Captain for 40, but on the beach for 52 years. Yeah. Now here, now let me tell you this now. I didn't.
Oh, is this?
No, this is just
Okay.
off the record. I didn't want to say it. Yeah.
So
We gotta get out of here again.
Is Hale Harrison?
Hale Harrison.
Hale Harrison.
Hale Harrison would be one to approach, maybe to help back it, wouldn't he?
If they
Wade's son. Okay.
So what are you doing, Sugar? Are you rolling or no?
I just thought I'd maybe just do a wide shot with the buoy.
But he's talking, and the farther you get from him, the.
Okay, go ahead.
See, I'm sorry. You're lucky,
Jim,
Jim. So Jim's got a mic where you work.
you want to know who I am now?
Go ahead.
Want me to start at what my name is and what have you?
Sure. Whatever
Okay.
makes you feel comfortable.
Okay. I'm Jim Kelly, born in Ocean City, 1 block south of the bridge. Used to frequent the beach when I was a kid. Loved it. Built sand castles. The beach became my home. Loved the ocean. Gradually, after a lot of time in the water, had a desire to maybe become a lifeguard. And the first year that I came on, I believe Bill Pacey was the captain. That was the year that I had graduated from high school, 1946. Went into the service, got out, got on the lifeguards again, 1948, 49, 50, 51. Enjoyed it thoroughly.
What was so great about it? What made it so much fun?
I think because I just love the ocean. Being in the water, on the beach, any kind of exposure to it. I'm drawn to the ocean.
What about the camaraderie you guys were talking about?
With the guys, of course, that's always a part of anything that you learn to enjoy. Working with the other fellows, depending on them, they depend on you. Doing something that you feel is worthwhile. After a good hard days of pulls on the beach, then you felt an awful lot of satisfaction. Good life.
What about your own personal development? How you became the person you became? How does being a lifeguard fit into that?
Oh, I think it came from the camaraderie, learning to work with the people, depending upon them, they depending on you. You learn responsibility.
Was there sort of a fraternal feeling among the guards?
I think there was, probably among most of the members, a little bit more than me. I didn't stay in the barracks with most of the guys. Being in Ocean City, fella, I had my own home that I'd go to every night. Though I wasn't with the guys as much as they normally were together. But I had enough association to learn about the fellows and thoroughly enjoyed that.
Was there a rivalry between the local boys and the city boys?
I never felt it. No, no. Anybody that was on the beach was a part of the team.
I'm sorry, that was such a great thing to say. Could you say it over again?
I felt that anybody that was on the beach and working for the patrol was part of our team. We were all team members.
Was there any kind of hazing? Any kind of, fun? Picking on each other, tricking each other?
Well, yeah, but nothing that was formal or like you would see in college teams or fraternities or anything like that.
It was all water-based.
It's always teasing of some sort.
Like what?
Good question. Good question.
Well, I've heard that one captain of the guards was prone to putting on a beach cap and faking being a drowning woman.
Mr. Jordan probably would know about that. I never encountered that.
Tommy Price had a way of doing that sort of thing. If he felt the guard was not paying as much attention to his people in the water as he should. One of the things we did do with rookies during my time was we'd take them out in the boat, and we'd have two. This is a surf boat which has two oarmen and a tillerman, and we'd take the boat out with a rookie, and we would broach the boat on purpose, meaning we'd turn it sideways to the surf so it would tip. And when it went over, one of us would stay under the boat, in the air pocket under the boat, and then the other guard would berate the rookie for not taking care of his fellow guard. And this would go on until the rookie was, pretty well berated, and then the other guy would come up out of the boat, out of the pocket of the boat, and so we did things like that. But it was nothing. But to me, that was also part of the training. You learned how to handle the boat. You learned not to broach the boat. You learned to feel around in murky, surfy water for a body if you had to. So there were a lot of things that that kind of hazing I thought was productive.
What did this boat look like?
It was most of them were a lap strake structure, 12 feet long, maybe about an 8-foot beam, very wide in order to take the rough water. Places for two sets of oars, and a tiller.
And describe when you would use that boat.
We practiced with it. The Beach Patrol never did have a large budget, so any flotation equipment that we had at the time was limited. The boat usually was, I think maybe at one time we might have had 3, and we would situate them equal distances apart on the beach. But one of them would always be at the Coast Guard station. And of course you had the Coast Guard duck that went out on difficult rescues and would assist the guards. So it was an exciting time.
Did you ever anything particularly scary rescue?
A number of them. My beach was the Coast Guard beach, and you had many times I've been under the pier after people with 12, 14-foot waves. I've still got barnacle scars on the bottom of my feet from warding it off on the pilings of the pier. Been over the jetty going into the inlet. Because we couldn't get around the inlet, we had to somehow get over it when the surf was appropriate.
Lehigh.
Do you think people appreciated what you guys were doing?
A lot of people did. My experience was that many of them were embarrassed for having to be helped. And usually they were so embarrassed that once they were safe on the beach, they would just melt into the crowd, you know. But every now and then, every great once in a while, someone would come up to you or stop you on the boardwalk and thank you.
How'd that feel like?
Money in the bank. To me, it was the difference between the small paycheck and total gratitude.
What did you guys do for fun?
Well, mostly beach parties, and we, if you were old enough, you frequented the places on the beach, the entertainment establishments on the boardwalk, and also a lot of people in Ocean City appreciated the beach patrol. We had businessmen in Ocean City that would throw parties, and I know one real estate executive would throw seafood parties for the beach patrol, and if he knew that you liked a particular kind of seafood, when you showed up, there would be a special for you.
What about the glamour factor of being a guard?
I don't think we thought of ourselves as glamorous. Probably other people did. You always had people wanting to take your picture. I remember the first time somebody asked for my autograph. What's the old saying? I didn't know how to spell it, but I had to perform it. But it was always surprising to me when people deferred to you in any way for being a lifeguard. Most of the guys that I know did the job as part of just, it was a job, and they got a lot of psychological reward from doing the job. It's a tremendous feeling to to leave the guard stand and enter the water and make the swim, working out the currents on the way out and how you're going to bring them back in, and actually making a rescue and getting them back in on the beach safe and sound, and knowing that you were the guy that did it.
That must be pretty rewarding.
Always was to me. I can remember a number of and you know, something else too. A lot of the guys I worked with, it became a sort of a routine thing. They became so good at it that it was just bim bam boom, you know, and it was done. We had one guy on the beach. He was 6'8½". He'd wade out and he'd just take them and toss them back up on the beach, you know. Others, a guy by the name of Charlie McCullough. Great guy, great guard, very well known. I think he was a second string All-American basketball player from Loyola. We had other guys, a friend of mine that I worked very closely with, a guy by the name of B.B. Smith. You'd get a group of people get caught in a riptide, which is an offshore current. And when BB would get there, he'd say, "Well, I guess you all wondered why I called you here today." And he'd get their hopes up, and a little bit of humor would get them relaxed a little bit. By the time one of the rest of us showed up with a buoy or something, then he'd have them all organized, ready to bring them back in.
How do you think being a guard carried through the rest of your life, or did it?
I think lifeguarding taught me to read people, for one thing. I think I learned to read people very early because I lifeguarded as a 16-year-old here, same as your father-in-law, Bill Pacey. Bill was the first guy that hired me, and I think that I also learned to accomplish difficult tasks. I also learned to work as a team or as an individual, whichever the occasion called for. I learned to care for people, to recognize, of course, one of the most basic things I learned as a lifeguard was to how to recognize someone who wasn't necessarily in trouble yet in the water and didn't know it themselves, but they were on the verge of getting in trouble. And that way you could make a rescue without too much fanfare. I mean, some guys would make a big show out of it. I always preferred to kind of wander down, and by the time I'd get alongside of them, they'd realize they need a little help.
So what is this? I've heard about you began something where you were a guard here in the summertime and then a guard in where? Fort Lauderdale?
Yes, a number of us would guard here in the summer and then guard in Fort Lauderdale in the winter. Actually, I didn't start that. Jim Kelly and Bob Agnew started it. And they talked me into, they went down one year and then talked me into coming the next year to guard. I'd been in South Florida a number of times before that, but just to dive and play around. But then I started guarding with them in the early 50s to the mid 50s. But then I met my wife in 55 on the beach and decided to stay in Fort Lauderdale.
Were you a lifeguard when you met your wife?
Yes.
Oh, tell us how you met your wife.
She will hate this. I had a gentleman had his engine had quit on his boat, and the surf had taken him into the bathing area, and I had gone down to help him get his boat out of the bathing area and get his engine dried out and started, and then I dove back off of his boat and swam back in, and I was walking back towards the guard stand, and this gorgeous creature, I hope she sees this, standing on top of the beach where the beach had been cut away by a storm, and she was talking very loudly to her girlfriend on the blanket, and she said, "Oh, Nancy, look at all the shark out there." And I looked out, and it was a school of porpoise. And I said, "Hey, pipe down." And she said, "I beg your pardon." And I said, they're not shark, they're porpoise." And she said, "I think I know a shark when I see one." And I said, "Where are you from?" And she said, "Michigan." And I said, "They've got a hell of a lot of shark in Michigan, haven't they?" And that was the beginning of a wonderful relationship.
Was she impressed?
Did you hear this, Carl?
Was she impressed that you were a guard?
I think her and her girlfriend thought I was stuck up. Her girlfriend said that, told me years later that first thing she says, "Look at him, he really thinks he's something, don't he?"
What else, John?
Um,
I was actually trying to get my reflection out of his glasses.
oh,
That's why I went there.
right.
One of, I might add or offer
Okay.
something. What I learned in Ocean City, I applied in Fort Lauderdale. Rescues here were routine, And I had made when I was in Lauderdale and decided to stay, I had a couple of rescues which were written up in the papers and all that business, and then little by little I was doing some volunteer work for the Red Cross, and so I stayed in Lauderdale, and through the kinds of skills that I picked up here in Ocean City, I was promoted rather rapidly up to aquatics director. And the 10 to 11 years that I spent as aquatics director in Fort Lauderdale, a lot happened. We built an internationally recognized swim program, an internationally recognized competitive swimming and diving program, and we founded the Swimming Hall of Fame there during the years that I was aquatics director. Then in later years, I'd always drank it and use it to brush my teeth and bathe in and swim and pull people out of. I decided I wanted to find out how they made it. So I was promoted to the utilities department, and after 20 years I retired there as assistant utilities director.
When you were a guard in Ocean City, did you have one beach that you had every year, or did you move around? And tell us about the beaches where you worked.
The first year I worked for Bill Pacey, he kind of moved me around a little bit. But the Coast Guard beach and the Maryland beach was known as my beach the years that I worked here. You know, I might tell you about, interesting for anybody that sees this, my first rescue. I can remember my first rescue, and I can remember one or two of the real exciting ones. All the rest of them just run together. You know, I mean, you see somebody in trouble, you're off the stand, you're in the water, you've got them back on the beach, and you're back to watching the water. But the first year I worked here, and we didn't have these things then. All rescues were free swimming rescues. If you couldn't swim and you couldn't, if you didn't have the ability, then you weren't a guard. And but I was walking down close to the beach, and that's when they had the old wooden jetties, and the wind was real high. There was a storm offshore, and I heard a girl holler my name, and I looked around, and there were two girls in the pothole that is dug out at the end of the jetty, with the surf coming in, hitting the jetty, and digging it out and digging it out. And they were in those two holes, and the water worked so it kept you locked in there. Another girl was sitting on the end of the jetty, and she was hollering for me. And I threw my whistle over my shoulder, and I took off and tripped over the first wave, went flat on my face. Picked myself up and ran back around and started in again and tripped over the next wave. And when I did, I lost my chain with my whistle and the key to my room around my neck in the surf. And then the third time I went out, I got over the first one, finally got out into the pocket where the two girls were, and got them by the back of the bathing suits, one in each hand, and pushed myself down on the bottom and walked them out of the surf until my head was up and I could breathe, and I got them into where I could let them go. Then I went back around, and for quite a while, took me a while to get this girl to come off the jetty into the water to where I could help her, and finally convinced her that I couldn't help her until I got her back into the water, you know. And finally I got her by the hand, and she dropped into the water, so then we got around the jetty and got back in on the beach. And that was if ever there was a Keystone Cop rescue, that was it. But that afternoon I was walking along the beach looking in the surf, and I saw something glint in the sun, and I went over and picked up my whistle and the key to my room when the day was out.
Okay.
I might add that the rest of my rescues were a little more professional.
Bill's signaling us. We gotta go.
Everybody's entitled to their own opinion.
All right.
Now kiss the buoy and say goodbye.
Okay, do I have to kiss it? Okay.
Put it on film.
Hey, listen, I will kiss it because this thing, you know, Bill, without this, you'd have had a lot of trouble at one time or another. Thank you, baby.
Do it again one more time. One more time.
Excellent.
Good.
All right.
Okay.
Oh, you got it. Go ahead.
You can go ahead. I'll just hold.
Oh well, I'm known as Lucky Jordan. Nobody else would. No one would know me by any other name. And I hitchhiked to Ocean City from Washington D.C. when I was.
Wait a minute. This is much more than I thought it would be. This is too good to let go. I have to get out of the way.
Oh.
It's too good to waste. So now I want you to do it without me holding the mic.
You want me to start over?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm known as Lucky Jordan. No one would know me by any other name, so I go by that in Ocean City. I hitchhiked to Ocean City as a 16-year-old in the summer, and Bill Pacey hired me as a as a lifeguard. And basically, I found a city and a beach and a group of people and a great bunch of guys that I enjoyed and appreciated, and even today when we see each other, we still try and outlie the other.
Well done.